Welcome back to Great Day Washington. Managing curly hair, it's no easy task. And our next guest wants to help parents of curly-haired kids like myself. We need some help and help our children take proper care of their hair from a very young age.
Dr. Crystal Aguh is a board-certified dermatologist, author, and mother of two, so she's here to share some easy tips for starting that healthy hair journey in childhood. Good to have you.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I remember so much as a kid. You have straight hair. My hair is naturally wavy, but it's always like, oh, I wish my hair was straight. Oh, she wish your hair was curly. How do we start that conversation early? The hair envy.
That's a great question, because hair envy is super popular and super common, especially among kids with curly hair, right? So when I was growing up, I wanted straight hair because I'd watch all of these 1950s musicals, and I wanted my hair to be really easy to brush through and comb through. And so I talked to a lot of parents that it's really important to establish kind of that appreciation for your own hair type at a very early age. So really giving kids positive affirmations like, I love how curly your hair is. I love how big it gets when it's wet, right? And so really putting a positive spin on a lot of these characteristics that people may consider negatives.
I already do that to my daughter. I feel like she has biracial hair, so it's kind of a mix, and I love it. I brought in some products today that I've been using because the ingredients are so important. What should and shouldn't we be using? I'm going to follow along with mine.
Absolutely. So that's a really great question, and it's so important to know about ingredients because the FDA actually does not very tightly regulate what we find in our skin and hair products, unlike the European Union. And so some of the things that I talk to parents about is I mentioned that you want to avoid parabens. Parabens are ingredients that help increase the shelf life of hair products, but they actually can act like hormones on our bodies. And so especially for kids, you really want to avoid products that have parabens because we don't want to expose them to these extra hormones. But I also talk about an ingredient called methyl isothiazolinone. So that's a mouthful. So we call it MTI for short. So you don't have to remember that. And it's usually found at the very bottom of the ingredients list. It's also a preservative. It is on here. Safe, however, it's on there. So it's a really common cause of allergic reaction. So if you love the product, if it's working great for your child, you don't have to switch it out. But if you notice that every time you shampoo your child's hair that they start to itch or they get a rash, then that's the first thing that you want to identify. And then the last thing that I think is really tricky for parents are these ingredients called essential oils. So essential oils are things like rosemary oil, tea tree, lavender, and we think, oh my God, I can say the name, so it has to be safe.
That sounds safe.
I know, right? But lavender and tea tree oil have actually been linked to early onset of puberty, and the data is actually pretty good for that. And then peppermint and eucalyptus oil can cause respiratory issues in babies, and eucalyptus oil can actually cause seizures. So pediatric neurologists are very familiar with this, and so if a child comes in with a new onset seizure, they'll ask parents, are you using eucalyptus oils or any derivatives like menthol, camphor, those types of things?
Is that for things that like actually go on the skin and the hair, or also just what you're breathing?
Skin and hair, and then breathing as well for the eucalyptus.
So really kind of avoid all of that.
Exactly.
I had no idea. Did you know that?
No, I had no idea.
No, so I really try to educate parents because it's hard to find that information, and we feel like we're doing, we want to do right by our children, and we think like, okay, it's, if I have these ingredients, they come from the earth and they're natural. But there are plenty of things that come straight from the earth that are very harmful.
And okay, so before we let you go, like styling the hair, like if we can't braid hair, how can we style our children's hair?
Well, I can't braid hair either, right? And so before I had my daughter, I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have a girl, can I take care of her hair? But you don't need to know how to braid hair to do your child's hair. And so I have something called a 3-minute rule, or 3 hairstyle rule. So you want 3 hairstyles. What you want: a 5-minute hairstyle that you can do before school that's really easy and that you're great at. And that can be something like a high puff where you just kind of gather the hair in a ponytail, slick the sides. You could do it high, you could do it low. That's perfect. So you're like already part of the way there. A 15-minute hairstyle is something that maybe you do like a few times a year for a birthday party. And so maybe you do more sections of that same hairstyle, so more puffs, or you can knot the hair. And then a 30-minute hairstyle you don't have to do. You can find a stylist that can do that like once a year for like a wedding. But you do not have to braid your child's hair for their hair to be healthy.
Christy.
Ding, ding, ding.
So much great
Thank
information.
you.
I feel like this conversation is going to continue after the show.
This is the beginning. Meanwhile, her book, Beginner's Guide to Curly Hair Care for Kids, is available on Amazon. Also going to get that.
Such great information.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Krista.